Win up to 4 2013 Silver American Eagles from the Doc by guessing silver's closing price for the month of October. Click on the Silver Giveaway banner on the homepage of silverdoctors.com for more details.
Metals and Markets is sponsored by DNA Precious Metals, a near-term producer of the Montauban tailings mine in Quebec, Canada. DNA Precious Metals trades on the OTC BB market under the symbol DNAP.
This is the Doc and Eric Dubin with the SD Weekly Metals and Markets. Joining us this weekend is a special guest coming back on the show here, GATA's Bill Murphy. Thanks for joining us again, Bill.
Great to be here, Eric and Doc. Thank you.
Always great to have Bill Murphy back with us. So the big story this week in the markets, obviously, at least the metals markets, was the CFTC coming out on Wednesday after 5 years of stonewalling in silence, closing down their silver investigation, claiming that there's no viable evidence of manipulation. Specific quote here, based upon the law and evidence as they exist at this time, there is not a viable basis to bring an enforcement action with respect to any firm or its employees related to our investigation of silver markets. So I'd like to start out here with your thoughts, Bill, on the announcement in general.
The first thing is, they put me to sleep with this whole thing. 5 years to come out with that. It is beyond farce. JPM himself on August 14th said the Justice Department is investigating him for six different violations or manipulations of markets, and I think there's been one or two since then. Jamie Dimon was just at the Justice Department, the CEO of Morgan, and they're talking about, for openers, $11 billion in fines. And here is Morgan's involved in one corruption after another, and with all the evidence that around the GATA camp that has been presented to CFTC, which we know are facts, we know what they did. To say that they come up with nothing it's ludicrous. And of course, some of your people may know where GATA comes from, is that we're not surprised that we said all along that this is partly a government operation. And when they look into it, then they find out where the CFTC says, oh yeah, they're doing this, but it's a boss. What are we going to do? And it's supposedly top secret. So, the thing it's a travesty, it's a fraud, and what they're doing to the little guy in terms of the investor it's worse than the mafia. But that's what's going on.
Eric, what are your thoughts related to the timing of finally coming out with an announcement only days after Andrew Maguire went public that the CFTC has had actual evidence from two former JP Morgan employees that that Morgan has been manipulating the markets, that the CFTC has been in possession of that evidence for over a year, about 13 months now?
Well, in the realms of political scandals and in public relations, it's always taught that you have to get in front of a scandal and put your own spin on it in order to control it. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. The announcement that the CFTC is concluding its investigation coincides with what would ultimately have been their typical 5-year period to do a review anyway. I mean, they could conceivably have an open case even after the period of 5 years had passed, but this is just, par for the course public relations theory in execution. And anybody who has a background in politics or public relations or marketing can see that that's what's going on here. And it's sad, but I think Bill's thesis is correct that we're essentially dealing with something that's government policy, and for an arm of the government to prosecute itself is not possible. The United States has to defend the dollar and maintain interest rates to preserve the effort of resuscitating the black hole that was caused by the deflation crash of 2008 and all the mortgage-backed securities going bad and on and on. And in order to maintain that facade, you have to keep the smoke alarm of the financial system, as GATA always says, gold, quiet. It can't signal an alarm that would raise inflation expectations, send bond yields higher, prices of bonds lower, the value of bank balance sheets in turn lower, and in fact begin to create the whole brand new crisis of the banking system showing its true colors as being highly unstable, if not, in fact, outright insolvent, because we still have the stupidity of mark to make-believe or mark to unicorn as opposed to the real value of these assets that the Federal Reserve has yet to fully consume with its quantitative easing program. So that's really where we stand. The CFTC wouldn't be able to, in its wildest dreams, serve its mission and be a regulator in this case, because it would take down the U.S. government, perhaps. That's the stakes that we see, and it's no
so
surprise.
Just add one more comment on this thing. As I may have mentioned before, and I've said it to my people a lot, I knew this a year ago, that basically two of the whistleblowers were from an accounting operation of J.P. Morgan's here in the United States. And they presented information last year, as you mentioned, to the CFTC that was vetted by a lawyer, and they thought something was going to be done about it. And all of a sudden, they realized that they weren't. And one of the guys got so scared for his life, he moved to China. It sounds ridiculous, but that's what Andrew McGuire has told us.
Given what's been going on in the last week with this CFTC announcement and the fact that many people believe that Bart Chilton actually is a good guy, that he's interested in free markets and a whole mission of the CFTC, we have put out a public petition, an open letter to Bart, and calling for him to resign his position and to come out formally and reveal what he knows and become a formal whistleblower with all the protections that can come under Dodd-Frank and other whistleblower provisions, and to also just put his story out in the media. He has consistently, on at least 3 occasions, come before the media saying that if the CFTC does not do X, Y, and Z by such and such time frame, I'm going to come out and make a statement. Well, the time is up, Bart, and if you really want to make a statement, now's the time. So, this is certainly not something that's easy to do, but we hope to have tens of thousands of people signing this petition over time, and we will provide a link for that in our radio write-up this evening. When you see the post, go over, take a look at the petition, spread it around, let people know about it, and give Bart the public support that he will need if he chooses to become a whistleblower. He will need the backing of the American people to protect him, and if he is, in fact, willing and able to present information that would have a change in the course of his history, then hopefully he'll do that.
The question is, will he live if he does it?
Well, you didn't hear that, Bart. Just, move along. Don't listen.
Exactly.
I mean, look, there's a lot going on in America right now. This whole thing about defunding Obamacare and the reawakening of the Tea Party and people throughout the more conservative wings of our political systems beginning to grow a spine and saying, hey, wait a minute, this is going too far. That's not so much the leaders actually taking a position, but in fact responding to a groundswell upwelling of public opinion. There's a change coming in this country, and whether or not the momentum continues remains to be seen. But there's definitely something bubbling under the surface where people, generically speaking, are just sick and tired of all of the lies that our government has been telling us, whether you speak of foreign policy and the issue of Syria as being just one of the latest examples of possible false flag issues and all the other various lies that come into justifications for getting Americans to go to war, to just domestic policy, where we have the NSA spying on practically everything that people do in a sapient police state, and on and on. I mean, I'm veering pretty far and wide away from precious metals, but the point being is that there is definitely something brewing in the public sphere when it comes to people's awareness of what's going on, and I think that this whole issue of precious metals manipulation can, in fact, ride that exact same wave of public indignation. So, folks, sign the petition.
I might
Speak
say,
out.
It was interesting that I've been talking to Reuters for, over a decade, and they finally mentioned my name.
I noticed.
About me. After all these years, they mentioned GATA, and what we said about, we weren't surprised about the verdict because we realized that the government was involved, and then MindWeb put up what Chris Powell had to say about the Exchange Stabilization Fund being fully authorized to do this in secret. So, I mean, it's they're allowed to do this if they want to do it. And then, interesting enough, this today on King World News, John Hathaway, who was a wonderful guy, and I had dinner with him like 10, 12 years ago, and he finally came out on our side and actually compared to the stifling of the silver market manipulation to the like what the State Department did at Benghazi. In other words, it was like having him investigate them, in that little incestuous world where nothing's going to come out of it no matter what.
Yeah, well, ever since you appeared before the Commodities Futures Trading Commission and gave testimony, GATA has gone from blacklisted to brownlisted.
Yeah.
And it's no longer verboten to speak of GATA in the press, and hopefully that continues. And it is, in fact, related to the exact same dynamics I was speaking about before. Americans are just tired of all of the lies, whether it's in the financial markets or in the domestic economy or in foreign policy. And hopefully this will continue as a dynamic and people begin to wake up more and more.
All right, well, I want to get into one of the other breaking / developing stories here over the weekend. Story we broke Friday afternoon on Silver Doctors. The Bank of Panama has announced a 5-day bank holiday over the weekend. They shut down at noon today on Friday. Access to all accounts is closed. No wires in or out. No international wires. No ATMs. ATM cards won't work. No paychecks on Friday. And the bank's scheduled to be closed until Tuesday. Now, on the Bank of Panama's website, notifying customers that they claim that it's due to integration of new systems. However, as any IT professional will tell you, it doesn't take 5 days to roll out a new IT platform. It's usually rolled out overnight to 1 day, and Public's Public's is definitely given plenty of advance notice to prepare for it. They're not told as the bank shuts down. And then the other interesting thing is that this is occurring also in another offshore tax haven such as Cyprus. So it's still a developing story. No confirmation yet that a bail-in bank collapse is in progress, but it's definitely suspicious. And if you're living in Panama and have all of your life savings frozen in a bank account this weekend, you're not really sleeping too good, are you guys?
It's certainly something to think about, that's for sure.
It just goes back to, even if this doesn't develop or turn into another Cyprus-type bail-in, it just serves as another potent reminder that once a bank shuts down and the collapse is in progress, you have to have prepared ahead of time. There's no getting your funds out once the event begins. Unless you're an insider who is told in the 12 or 18 hours beforehand, and like we saw in Cyprus.
And unfortunately, this is a pattern that's been accelerating. I mean, it wasn't only a few weeks ago that Poland had issues, and you have to wonder what is the state of the international banking community with these things rolling out now. What seemingly is that once every 2 months we get a new bank issue in any given country. So the argument for holding physical gold in hand or having diversification of your assets overall certainly is highlighted by these events.
So we'll definitely keep the readers and listeners updated as that story progresses, develops. I want to give listeners a quick update on the wholesale silver market here in the U.S. Not too much change this week to premiums. Steady demand, but definitely down a bit from the recent run-up towards towards $25 in silver. The Silver Eagles and Silver Maples, the main mint products, are all alive, or about a slight, maybe a week delay in some of the suppliers, with premiums continuing to slowly creep back towards what was normal about a year ago. In the generic products like the silver rounds and the 100-ounce bars, again, premiums are also slowly starting to creep down. For the most part, they're all live. The 100-ounce Johnson Matthey bars are finally live, back in stock at several of the suppliers for the first time in, I think, since February or March. The other popular bars, the Englehards and the RCM, the Royal Canadian Mint bars, are either in stock or in a short 1 or 2 week delay. So, as well as the 90% is available live across all the wholesalers. So, the retail shortage has eased up significantly, so we'll continue to keep our eyes on that. And overall at ST Bullion too, we've seen demand down quite a bit as the silver market has calmed down a bit here, as it's backed off of 24, 25 of the recent highs, kind of holding in a trading range here in the low 20s. A lot of the excitement seems to come when we get the big moves, both to the downside and the upside. People looking for big sale buys, and also afraid that the market's getting away from them is when people typically emotionally make their investments in the metals, is what we see. So I know, Bill, you'd wanted to talk about just the trading recently in general in the metals and gold and silver and what you've been seeing going on there.
It's getting off the charts how obvious this same old word manipulation is. I mean, first of all, from a macro sense, just this past year alone, I mean, you've had the same QE, yet the Dow's going straight up with very minor corrections, and gold and silver were slaughtered. I mean, about a year ago from today, gold was at 17.93, silver was right above 35. And look where we are now. And then it's just blatant what they have done to cover up the things that you were mentioning earlier. And just recently, it's a perfect example. You get the surprise taper thing, so got everybody off guard. We'll not even get into the insider trading, which was blatant 10 minutes before the news came out. And the market shoots up 60, 70 bucks, and within 2 days it's right back down again, as if it never occurred. And it occurred during a gold option expiration. So that the gold option writers, a lot of them alive, what we call the gold cartel, were all caught off guard like everybody else. So the gold cartel itself came in, bombed the market, allowed the traders to get out. We went down to 13.05 again. Every penny was erased, and then it's starting to go back up again. So they got let out. I mean, it makes the mafia look like rinky-dink.
So I'm curious, we know that the paper smashes were coming in when it came to the surprise no tapering announcement. Not much we could see. But it seems that there was some supply of official gold marshaled to actually push prices down further, because if we look at GOFO rates in the last 5 days or so, that swing back into the positive, and a lot of people have speculated that is associated with more supply being actually physically available within the London bullion market. Have you heard anything about that, Bill? And
if I might say, there's a little bit of a misconception out there in that the market is it's wagging the dog. That's for sure. But every day there's a PM fix in London where 90% of the physical deals are done all over the world. It's a fact.
Right.
And so, I mean, this morning the PM fix was 13.20 or something, and then the PM fix jumped to 13.40, but the AM fix, which isn't that big a deal, 13.20. Still, even at 13.40, that's where physical deals were done all over the world. So the paper market influences the whole thing, but when you get down to the end of the day, or in the end of the day in London, I mean, you've got transactions done at a physical price, and you're right. They have to mobilize enough physical gold to meet demand, no matter what we would say about how low what the price is. So it all goes hand in hand. What they do, they work over the financial market and the futures markets with what we call these flash crashes. I mean, it's happening every day. Gold gets hit for $10 in minutes, seconds. It happened 3 days in a row. And then, of course, we know about the big one in mid-April and so on. But this has been happening more and more and more, that they're using this tactic to terrorize the longs and the business that are out there.
Right, and you've always speculated that at some point, and GATA has backed this up with years of research, that at some point the physical supply able to carry on these masquerades will end, or at least central banks in the West will join their compatriots in the East and no longer will wish to see the flowing of gold moving eastward to the Central Bank of China and Russia, etc. And at some point this has to end, because quite literally there is a finite amount of gold to be able to execute this game. We always wonder when that's going to happen, and it seems like the rate at which gold is being depleted in the West, whether you look at possible supplies out of the central banks here, but certainly as visible within COMEX inventory warehouses and inventory supplies and even JPM's vaults and so forth, there's a huge movement of gold moving eastward. And I openly question and throw this out on the table just as an open question. Is there any indication in your mind or in the conversations you've had with anybody that gives some indication that this flow is going to slow at some point? in order to execute these manipulations. I mean, there has to be an end game at some point.
Well, John Emery and I talk about this all the time. We become good friends and chat about it. You know, what is the bad guys, as I would call them, end game? Where are they going with this thing? Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult to know because of the secret nature of the market. I mean, what's liable to happen is they're just at some point out of nowhere they're going to hit the wall, and they're just not going to be able to control it anymore. There's a number of people in our camp that talk about a reset where all of a sudden when it's just about ready to hit the wall, they're going to raise the price to some astronomical level and for various reasons and so on. I don't know, but I know it's coming. I know that these prices in gold and silver are ridiculously in terms of that they're artificially low. It's the same thing what happened in 1999 and 2000, except that time the prices were going sideways or kept down. This time they've crashed them. But since, 10, 12, 13 years ago, 14, they're running out of more and more gold, and that's why you're getting these different stories about allocated gold, about the gold full rate, this thing, that thing. They're running around trying to plug the hole in the holes in the dike, and it's going to come out of nowhere, and that's why people have to stay in the game. That's why it's good to know what's going on, because just like you're talking about it in Panama, once this thing hits, it's very likely to happen overnight or in a very short period of time. And if you're not in it, it'll be too late.
And they're running so low that if you look back, say, 10 or 15 years ago, they just raid England's supply and have Brown dump the supply into the market, or they likely lease out other countries' reserves, whether that be Germany or the Netherlands or others. But now it's to the point where that they need to go over to India and have Bernanke meet with the Indian finance minister, and a few months later, India is suddenly raising import taxes on gold and doing everything they can to get gold out of the Indians' hands. And it sure looks like that they've done everything they can, being the bankers, to stop Indians from buying gold. So that to me, that's a sign that they're running out of the supply, that it can't continue forever.
That's a good point. And even with all of the efforts that the Indians are making, the bank authorities there, they'll probably only be able to curtail about half of the demand on a net basis. And even the Gold Council is talking about how India is importing in excess of 200 million metric tons to date, with all of the is it now 7 tax hikes and curtailments of the ability to make loans to bullion importers, and the re-exportation of the 20% and all of that other goofy stuff that they've done. So it does suggest that the West is scraping the bottom of the barrel when they're that paranoid about what's going on.
And they may be able to have somewhat marginal success in India. I think Eric and I are kind of under the agreement that a large of that really is just going to go into the black market purchases. But even if they have some marginal success in India, I don't see them having that sort of success in China. And another year or two, China alone might do them in. So definitely looks like they're starting to scrape the barrel. All right, so for a recap here, we discussed the CFTC's closing or shutting down their 5-year silver investigation, finding no viable evidence of manipulation. And we talked about over on the News Doctors petition that we started for Bart Chilton to resign and become a whistleblower. So if you'd like to sign that petition, we'd like to get over 10 or 15,000 people to sign it and send it over to Bart Chilton to put some real pressure on him. So that's over on the newsdoctors.com. And then we'll keep an eye on the developing story, the banking shutdown at the Bank of Panama, and whether the bank does reopen for business as normal on Tuesday, or whether it turns into an extended bank holiday. I'd like to thank our guest, Bill Murphy, for coming back. Always great to have you, Bill. Appreciate your time again. And for the Doc and Eric Dubin, thanks for tuning in to the SD Weekly Metals and Markets.
SD Bullion.